The term, worst year ever, gets tossed around a lot these days, mostly on the internet, and for reasons like, I was disappointed in the latest Star Wars movie. But scientists and historians have actually argued that no year in the long history of this planet was worse than the year 536. While, sure, there have been plenty of worthy contenders for the worst year ever over the course of history, no single year has had more of a measurably bad impact for the decades that followed. Today, we're going to explain why the year 536 was the worst year to be alive. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Oh, and leave a comment too, and let us know what piece of history you would like us to explain next. Okay, now let's settle this once and for all. Year 536, worst year ever. A fog descended and lasted 4 months. While serving as a military advisor to Belisarius, one of the Byzantine Empire's most distinguished generals, Byzantine historian Procopius noticed some trouble was brewing in the air while traveling with his boss in Sicily in the year 536. He wrote of a sun that gave forth light without brightness, during like the moon, during this whole year. And it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse, for the beams it shed were not clear nor such as it is accustomed to shed. Translated, it was all dark outside, like, all the time. He, of course, wasn't the only one to notice the sun appeared to be in a mood during 536. Michael the Syrian, a Byzantine scribe, would later write of this period, the sun became dark and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for about 4 hours, and still this light was only a feeble shadow. Everyone declared that the sun would never recover its full light. The fruits did not ripen and the wine tasted like sour grapes. This wishy-washy sun situation cast a non-metaphorical dark cloud over the globe that darkened the sky for at least a full year in 536. Researchers later discovered evidence of a massive volcanic eruption whose ash was likely a major contributor to the Seattle-like weather, minus all the rain, spreading ash and destruction on a global scale. Not to mention, it made the grapes sour and the wine bad. So that's an easy strike for the year 536. With darkness came widespread famine. Basic biology teaches us that plants need the sun to aid in their growth and survival. So not having direct sunlight for the duration of at least a year did a real number on the crop output around the world and sparked a widespread famine around the globe. And it's not just that the plants wanted to catch their rays, it was just too darn chilly for crops to grow. With the sun cloaked in an endless cloud, the temperature of the Earth dropped between 1.6 and 2.5 degrees Celsius, or 34.88 to 36.5 degrees Fahrenheit for all the Americans thinking that doesn't sound so bad. But it also cooled temperatures for decades to come. Crop scarcities were reported far and wide around this time period, including Ireland, who suffered through their own horrible-sounding food depletion they called bread failure. A plague swept through the Byzantine Empire. A dusty veil covering the sun wasn't the only bad thing in the air for these poor people just trying to live their lives in 536. There was also a plague or two waiting in the wings to strike on these vitamin D-deprived immune systems. Nobody was immune to this infestation. It swept through the lower classes all the way to the imperial palace. Symptoms, as it was lovingly described, began with a sore that formed on the palm of the hand and progressed until the afflicted one could not take a step. The leg swelled. Then the buboes burst and pus came out. Obviously, if this same plague were to infect the world today, there would probably be a TV show called Dr. Bubo's Busbuster, and with it a new contender for the worst year to be alive. With the plague beginning to make the rounds in Constantinople, the city began to stink, what with the piles of dead sick bodies just sort of being tossed around into the sea, only to resurface later. There wasn't a lot of burial planning going around back then. Bring out your dead. There was more of a wing it vibe around the Justinian plague. Emperor Justinian ordered the bodies to be removed from the city. I'm not dead. Oh, he says he's not dead. Yes, he is. I'm not. But all that did was expose more people to the disease, as healthy people were responsible for moving deceased, sickly bodies out of the cities. Things weren't all bad for Emperor Justinian though, as the plague that took all of these lives and made the city a smelly nightmare would later be named the Plague of Justinian. So that was probably nice for him. Less so for the estimated 50 million people that died from it, however. Summer snow fell in China and Mesopotamia. Around 536, the climate in China started its journey into madness, doing perfectly normal things like raining dust you could scoop into your hands. Not only should it not rain dust, it certainly shouldn't be measurable by the scoopful. The Nansha, a 6th century chronicle, reported a yellow ash-like substance falling from the sky. They named their freak weather hui, or dust, and said it was yellow in color. Whether this was volcanic ash or just some random unexplained climate reaction is not known. However, this was just the beginning of China's climate disruption. The chronicles of the southern dynasties reported on a rare summer-winter weather event with frost in the midsummer and snow in August. Like a Southern California girl in Chicago in January, the crops were not here for this cold snap. Summer crops were destroyed. And the city of Hsinchu, along with others, were thrown into a deadly famine that lasted for 2 years and resulted in the deaths of around 70% to 80% of the population. Volcanic eruptions made things worse. Researchers discovered evidence deep in the ice sheets of Iceland and Greenland that indicated a major volcanic event occurred around 536. Volcanic eruptions in Iceland in 540 and 547 thrust people into the literal dark ages, with ash lining the skies and blocking out the shiny, hot sun thing in the sky that the people of the 6th century were starting to get used to having around. Based on a tropical volcanic ash later discovered, some scholars have suggested a volcano in El Salvador went blasting off around the year 535 or 536. Still others pointed to a volcanic eruption in North America as a contributor to the dark skies around the world. When combined with the 2 Icelandic volcano eruptions, it kicked off what was adorably called the Late Antique Little Ice Age. This cute little ice age cooled off the planet for at least a decade and resulted in the death of crops and, subsequently, people. Both directly through starvation and indirectly, a malnourished population was more susceptible to diseases, of which there were plenty running around. Well, there's one thing that certainly couldn't claim it had a bad year: exploding volcanoes. 536 likely sealed the fate of the Roman Empire. By the time the 6th century rolled around, the Romans had migrated east to Constantinople. And, under the guiding hand of Emperor Justinian, the Romans sought to get back to the glory days of the empire, much like a high school graduate who still hangs around campus and wears their Letterman jacket. I mean, it is pretty cool. Though some of Justinian's generals saw success in this cool goal, most notable, Belisarius, who fought against several different armies, including Goths, Vandals, and others, Justinian himself couldn't mirror the success due to constant uprisings and imperial instability. Those pesky uprisings, always getting in the way of success. To add sickness to war defeats, the Byzantine Empire would never fully recover from the disease and famine sparked by the events of 536. The Byzantine Empire lost between 35% to 55% of their population in the year 541. Once the bubonic plague moved in, it did what the plague did best: kill depressingly high percentages of entire populations. Historians believe the plague could have